This is Vaughan at westcoatbellpottery.ca in Canada, Nova Scotia. This is the video on firing your pottery once you've got all your pieces together. And so I'm going to click back to a video I did a couple of years ago for the bisque firing because I did such a good job on that one. And I'm just going to repost that one in this video, so you're going to get not all of it, maybe most of what was in that one, because it was a really nice one for doing bisque firings, which are the easiest firings that we do because we can stack things on top of each other, next to it they can touch each other. The only thing you'll see in the video. And for the bisque work, you need to make sure they are thoroughly dry before you put them in the kiln. And thoroughly dry means absolutely dry. You can blow pots up, and Newcomen engine, when they invented the steam engine, is basically what happens to a piece of pottery. You create steam from water, and of course it can't escape if it's in the clay, so it literally explodes. So make sure your pots are completely dry. I would put them in fresh air, blowing wind, sun, but not when they're wet. Wait till they're almost dry before you do sort of rapid drying like that. Put a fan blowing on them any way you can to get them dry. If you already have a kiln that's hot, put them on top of the kiln any way you can, thoroughly dry. Okay. The next thing is have an assortment of pieces. Don't just have big pieces because they will take up a lot of space. So you need small things to go in your crevices. You can pack things on top of each other, inside each other, and they can touch because there's no glaze involved in this firing. So you can actually squeeze as much into that kiln as possible. And everybody's very conscious of energy these days, but it isn't just about space, it's about the weight of the pieces. So if you've got mass, it takes a lot more energy to heat up a large mass than it does a small mass. So it's not just about the actual volume of the pieces, it's more about the actual weight of clay that you've got inside the kiln with the shelves and the props that hold the shelves up. But you'd still try and be efficient and cram as much into this type of firing as you can, because they can touch, they can be inside each other and everything. So that's the second thing that I think is really important. So variety of pieces, not all my pieces are here. And also I've thought over time that the shapes of pieces, things that I could have a bowl sticking like this with this piece going down and coming up over there. So I could get one of these and another one like it next to that bowl going underneath the wall of the bowl. So it actually makes it more efficient to cram a lot of pieces in if you've got an assortment of pieces. Do I have a bowl here? This one kind of does what I'm saying. So I can have this next to it, and it overlaps the foot of this piece a little bit, but a wider bowl would have been a better example. But you can actually see that you can get pieces that will overlap each other in the kiln, and that saves space as well. But the most important thing, I guess, is if you've got wide pieces, is to have a whole bunch of short pieces that can fit underneath. And when you're firing the kiln, if you put all your mugs like this next to each other, the width of the bottom determines how many pieces you can get on that shelf. But if you simply flip this mug upside down and have it all fired on its rim, then you can get two pieces touching each other in the fire and really cram the things much tighter that way, because they actually, it's like a jigsaw puzzle at that point. So that's a nice trick as well. But it's really nice when you can get something like a mug inside a flower pot, which I've got here. So these will fire inside the actual flower pot. I can show you this. Things don't warp in a bisque firing, so it's easy. Let's make sure I don't rattle it too much. You can see I can fire a mug inside that flower pot. It could be nice if I've got another flower pot, I can fire inside this one and then a mug inside that one, so you can get three things on top of each other as well. So that will save you a lot of space and fire a lot more pieces in a bisque firing. Okay, 3 bowls inside each other. These are little flower pot bases. But if there is a little looseness, I would say you can fire them inside each other because they wobble around a little bit. Let's tip that down a bit. So these wobble around a little bit. So that's okay to fire because they will shrink in the firing, and I always kind of think, well, they all shrink the same rate, but that's not always the case. You can fire 3 like that inside each other, and then I can pack. Let's get this off. It might be getting hot now because they're on the kiln. These can go, well, no, it wouldn't save much space. I'm saving maybe ½ an inch to an inch by firing these next to each other, but you can get the idea. But this would be a very wasteful way of doing it because they're so much shorter. So I'll try and put all of these on a shelf where they're all the same height, because that really is important, that everything in this firing is kind of that height on that shelf. And these flower pots can be fired upside down, just like the mugs can be fired upside down. So you can get 2 flower pots next to each other, much closer together, and all that, and that saves space as well. Okay, so you just saw me pack the kiln. I'll put this little bit in. I hope that was speeded up a bit because it took a while. You can see that I've got all the pots in there like I just described, and I've left a gap of about 3/4 of an inch to an inch around the pots to the elements. So I don't want to get too close to the elements because you can crack your pots that way as well because they heat up too quickly. So keep a little gap between your elements and the pots. But you can see I've crammed everything into that space, and I've put a stick across the top of 2 of the props just to make sure that nothing is too tall. So it's a good idea to get yourself a stick that you can fit in the kiln and just do that to actually show that, and look alongside it, make sure none of the pots are too tall for the actual props, because that's a very common mistake, and you can crack and actually have a serious kiln disaster. If the shelf collapses down on that pot and then makes a bump, it might crack more than one piece. So just make sure that nothing's too tall for the props. All right, so we know that everything's the right height. Whatever shelves you have, shelves tend to get stuck to kiln props a little bit, and you can see the debris. Every so often you should sand these at the bottom of the shelves just to make sure nothing's on there making your shelf uneven. Okay, so I just sanded and ground any lumps off the bottom of this kiln shelf so that it's smooth again, because the props tend to stick little bits. I bat wash some of my props, and basically they can leave bat wash on the shelf. So that's what those marks are. These are the advancer shelves. The other side I've actually bat washed. Make sure there's nothing sharp on them, because usually things just lift right off these type of shelves. And otherwise, if you have the old style shelves and glaze bits stick on the shelf, you can cut your hand seriously on those shelves. So be very careful. If you have a glaze run and it sticks to the shelf, it'll probably crack your pot, and when you chisel it off, you'll leave sharp bits on here. So be very careful that you don't rub your hand across something, because I've cut myself many times on those old shelves. These shelves are so great because nothing actually sticks to these. You just lift it off, and then you can lightly sand it with sandpaper, and that takes care of it. So it's a good idea to use sandpaper. But anyway, so just beware of the shelves after glaze firings. And then you just place the shelf down, because we know it's the height for the props. And make sure it's even and it doesn't wobble. If you have new kiln furniture, it won't wobble, but older furniture like mine, sometimes it will wobble. So it should be stable. That's pretty good. I mean, I can force it to wobble, but it's not wobbling on its own. Okay, so then I'm going to put these in. Okay, so I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21 bowls on that shelf. And there's another thing that you have to watch out for when you're packing your shelves. I'm not sure if you can see the pyrometer. See if we can get over there. The pyrometers are just here and all the way down. This prop
is going to correspond with that pyrometer there, thermocouple, not pyrometer, that thermocouple. So when I put the shelf on, it's going to touch that, and you must not touch that with your kiln shelf. So make sure when you put the kiln shelf on that you don't actually hit that, because they break. You see, you've got to be very careful. If I can leave that there, I think you can see how. So this shelf, I know they're the right height. I'm putting it down so it's close to the wall on the other side. Oh, it's just underneath anyway, so we didn't have to worry too much. Okay. My shelves are very thin. These are the Advancer shelves. They're very expensive, but they're worth it. Once you make some money from pottery, you should switch over to these shelves. It's worth the investment, and they'll be tax deductible against your business anyway for your profits and such. And they save you money over time in heat, and they also save you money in volume because they're shorter, they're thinner, so you get more pots in the kiln. And pots never stick to them, so you save the pot. If it runs onto it, you can sand it off, it'll be fine. You've saved a pot. But anyway, so you can see that didn't touch the thermocouple. There's a little gap. I can put my finger not quite underneath it, so I've got about a 1/4 inch a gap between the shelf and the thermocouple. So be careful. Thermocouples are not expensive, but you don't want to crack your thermocouple because you're firing. You'll need a new thermocouple. So now I'm going to put my birdhouses, feeders rather. It's spring, so I'll be making all the garden pots. Okay, that's my next layer up. And I've got bird feeders, planters, hanging planters there, and a hanging planter upside down here because get more pieces in by having it upside down. And I've put mugs, and there's one of the mugs upside down there, so I can fit 2 mugs on the bottom and 2 mugs on the top there, and save space that way. And then my kiln props I'm not sure about, so I'm going to put this across and just see whether I feel like it's too close. I can just do this. It's very close. Let's try this way. Nope, it's good. So there's a gap between that. So so that kiln is good to go again. So let's make sure over here. I want to make sure this mug is not too tall either. Sometimes you just have to kind of fudge it a little bit, but yeah, it's just right. It's fine. Otherwise, I could put a shorter mug on there anyway. Let's see if this one's shorter than this one. Yes, it is, just a touch. So I can swap that mug around. That's ready for the next shelf. And let's make sure we don't hit the pyrometer again. The thermocouple, sorry. The pyrometer is the thing that reads the temperature. This actually is the thermocouple, is the sensor. Okay, so then we have one last shelf to do. Okay, I have a lot of mugs in there. So 3, 6, 8, another 6 is 14, 19, 20, 22, 24, 25 and a ball. So could I get any more in there? So let's see. Okay, so I managed to get 4 more mugs in this kiln by turning some upside down and some the right way up. And that was, so that's 4 extra mugs. That's whatever you sell them at, but that's going to save you some money. Or does it? Because remember, firing isn't just the number of pieces you get in the kiln. It's the mass of the clay that you're firing that takes the heat that you're putting into the kiln to heat it up to the temperature. So I don't know if you win this way as far as cost in electricity, but I do know you win in the sense that you can get more pots out of the kiln faster. I have a rush order for 50 mugs on at the moment, so I'm trying to squeeze as many in as possible. And some of these weren't thoroughly dry, so that brings me to the next point. If you are in a rush and your pots are pretty dry, but you can still tell that there's a little moisture in them, usually in the thicker areas of the piece, you have to heat your kiln up at a certain rate so that it will actually not blow your pots up. So that's the next step. Okay, so I have, this is idle at the moment. I have a program in here that I use for that very process of drying things out. Enter program, user 1, and I press enter. Segments 1, I press enter. Ramp 1 will be like 50, 59, and I press enter. Degrees Fahrenheit, 189. Remember, 212 is boiling point. So 189 is hot enough so that it will force things to dry a bit faster, and I press enter. And then I hold it, depending on how much moisture is in there, 1 to 3 hours. So I'm going to put 3, enter. And alarm is the same. And that's complete. So now when I turn it on, it's going to fire at 59 degrees an hour up to 189. So it'll take 2 hours of gentle heat to actually get the pots hot, and then it's going to hold for 3 hours. And during that 3 hours, I will keep checking to see at what point the pieces are dry. And how do I tell that? Well, you close the lid, you open your spy holes, and if it's winter, it's easy, a cold mirror, or a cold back of a spoon. You can keep it in your refrigerator, of course, as well. And you simply hold it. If you do this, hold it next to the top spy hole with a cold mirror, it will show moisture condensing on the spoon if there's any moisture in the clay in the kiln. And if you show any moisture at all, you've got to keep it preheating. So you open the lid again and just let it preheat for a bit longer. So I would check that like after an hour and after 2 hours, but you've got to make sure that you close the lid just temporarily. You've got your spy holes all the way open, and so heat rises, it'll come out at this spy hole and just hold something cold like a back of a spoon or a mirror and see if there's any condensation. I'll check at 1 hour, I'll check at 2 hours, and if not, it'll go to the full 3 hours. But I never put wet things. It's only slightly damp, like way past leather hard, but slightly damp pieces in a kiln, because if you rush dry something, it cracks and all that. So just don't do it. I just have this rush order for 50 coffee mugs, and so I'm really trying to get them ready for Monday. And this is Thursday. So anyway, that's my bisque firing. And of course, the programs in the kiln, you've got slow bisque and fast bisque for the actual pre-programmed ones in here. I always use slow bisque. It takes longer, but I just feel firing slower is better. If you've got jewelry or something tiny, then you can use fast bisque. And if you don't have a computer kiln and you have a manual kiln, remember it's cone 06 for the bisque firing. Don't make the mistake of putting cone 6 in your little Dawson kiln sitter. And if you don't use one of those, you just use a thermocouple, pyrometer thermocouple. You just have to take it up to about 1060 or 1025, 1060 for the bisque firing. And 1,000 degrees is fine too. I mean, anything between 1,000 and say 1060 centigrade. And if it's Fahrenheit, it's about 1840, I think, is the actual bisque temperature. And some people will bisque higher, but I found 06 temperature is fine for bisque firing, except for my earthenware. And that I actually bisque fired to cone 01, and then I glazed to 04. So that's a different thing. You'll see in my other videos why I do that. But anyway, so good luck with your first bisque firing. Just let me know if you have any questions. Here's one of the things that people don't really know about in bisque firings, is that if your clay fires to stoneware temperatures and you're bisquing to 1,000 degrees centigrade, which is 225 below stoneware, the pots do not warp in a bisque firing, and therefore you can lay mugs on their side with the handles leaning on another mug and so on. Unpacking a bisque firing is actually a cinch. I mean, there's nothing really, that you have to worry about here. The main thing is when you take a shelf off, you need to rattle it around a little bit just to make sure there's no kiln support prop stuck to the bottom of the shelf that will then drop on somebody's piece. And that has happened to me, so watch out for that. I got 2 kilns here to unpack. If you're a part of a school, you may have similar situations, or this is a production studio here, so I often fire 3 to 4 bisque firings and then do a whole week of glazing. It's just the way I like to do it. And these are the tiles, the tile I guess that I did from that making odd things to make your booth more interesting, or your little table that you're setting up. So it stayed pretty flat in the bisque firing. Tiles are really hard to keep flat. I mostly do my tiles in earthenware. So this is a cone 6. There's another one of those trays I did in that video. So see, there's nothing much you have to do. This is a thing for a pet clinic. And then I have a bunch of these little stoppers for bottles. Literally no problem, just lift things out. Being a little gentle, because bisqueware is not fully hard yet. And put that there. This is the only thing that I would say. Rattle your shelf just a touch so that it releases any kiln prop, hopefully, underneath. Then you lift it carefully. Make sure you don't bang the brick as you lift it up, or bang the thermocouple, because thermocouples break really easily. So you lift it up and out. And then you continue to unpack, and you do the same all the way down. It's basically you can stack things on top of each other, on their sides in a bisque firing. You cram everything in you can fit, just to really make it as economical as possible. But anyway, this part that we're going to now is about glazing firing, which is a lot harder to control. There are all sorts of things that can make or break a pot. But the main thing is, if you're using the glaze recipes that I'm posting in my videos, they're all from Mastering Cone 6 Glaze book, most of them anyway, and they've been tested and they're very kind of stable, so you shouldn't have a problem. But there are things like thinness of glaze, thickness of glaze, that even with a good glaze will make it not work very well. So if you start glazing and things are going wrong, you basically need to test, which is always hard because it's costing you money firing a kiln. So I would say, if you have friends who have got kilns firing already, you can make some little test tiles and just say, could you put these in your firing so I can see what they look like? And if you're just making a 2" by 1" little strip, often it's good to bend it a little bit. But remember that potters are very precious about the kiln shelves because they're expensive, and if a glaze runs, you're ruining their kiln shelves. So be very sensitive if you're going to ask somebody to fire your pots. So anyway, just use those good glazes I've got recipes for, and you should be at least, have a head start in the whole glazing thing, which was in the last video. So we're going to pot and fire the kiln. So I have been glazing. These are the pieces that I've been glazing. There's a whole bunch. I've got a planter here. Let me show you what I'm doing on the kiln here. I'm basically glazing and packing the kiln just to keep my space, reasonable. The first thing is, in a glaze firing, try and match the heights of everything up. They can't touch each other. You can't nest things inside each other, although saying that, there are some potters that can do that, but not where the glaze touches. The glaze, you'd have to glaze your pieces accordingly so the glaze doesn't touch. But anyway, we're not going to even go there because you're a beginner. And so glaze your pieces the way I showed in the last movie, and then you've got a whole bunch of things that you're just going to load in the kiln. The main thing is, if you're not going to fire on stilts, you need to make sure the glaze is wiped off. This is a raised foot on this here area, and this area is hollowed in a bit so it doesn't touch the kiln shelf, just in that area there. But you might want to wipe that off if you want to be really sure. But glazes run a little bit, not much if you've got good glazes. And just make sure you've got like 1/8 of an inch, 3 or 4 millimeters up, to actually make sure your glaze doesn't stick to the kiln shelf. I sign my pieces, but I put glaze on the bottom too, and I fire these on stilts. This is a little big to fire on stilts, so I'm just going to place it on the kiln shelf as it is, because I've got the foot clean. There's a little bit there, but that's not going to touch the kiln shelf because these are higher up than that area there. So I just have a few mugs in there at the moment. They're positioned about 1/4 to 1/2 inch apart, and they're on stilts. So basically, if the stilt
pin warps or bends a little bit, the piece won't touch the other piece next to it. It will just be supported by the clay part of the stilt, which you can grind that little bit off anyway. If you're firing without stilts, just on bare clay, bisque fired clay, then you can just pop them right on the actual kiln shelf, but keep them 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch apart from each other. This has got base matte green, matte turquoise, and then variegated blue and oatmeal on the top, and I allowed it to dribble because I want to encourage some dribbles on this one. So that is about 1 inch apart from the pieces next to it there. I could move it over just a touch. Just make sure you don't get them any closer than 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch close to each other. They will shrink in the firing, so they'll be further apart when you see it opened. So all I'm doing for the other pieces, because I fire on stilts, I make the stilt touch the pot like that, so it's, the pot is going to shrink, remember, so I want to make sure the pin is 1 centimeter in, or about 1/3 of an inch. And then I hold it with a handle like that, with the stilt tight, and I place it where I want it to go. Okay, this is the shelf. I just placed it so it's level. There's no wobbling. So that's what the setup is. It's actually got enough pieces, to actually fill the space without getting too close. The kiln prop that's in there is a little tall because it's about 1.5 inches taller than the pieces that I need it to be, but I don't have to put 2 shorter props together, which actually means it might wobble more. So I'm using the bigger one because that makes it safer. And you place it on, and there shouldn't be a wobble. I have to push it to make it wobble, so it's actually pretty good. And then you do the next level the same again. This is the kiln prop that I've been using on the bottom level, and then I have this one, which is a 6 inch, and this is the 8 inch, 6 inch. I can get to the 8 inch by adding a 2 inch on top of that one, and those are almost but not quite level, so you're always going to get a little bit off because these are hand cut, I think. But anyway, I try not to do 2 props because it encourages wobbling, but I can't find another prop that height, so I've got to use 2 together, and I'm going to set these and see how level they are. Yep, that's pretty good actually for 2 together. So we continue doing this. I have a stick which I can set on the props and see what the height is that I have between the tallest piece and the piece of wood. If it looks like it's ridiculously too much, that's a waste of kiln space. So I may end up doing a shorter prop in that area there by adding a 6 inch prop and then a 1 inch on top of it. So I have these little 1 inch props I'm going to sit on top of my 6 inch props. Then I'm going to put my stick back and see if I am now touching the ball or not. Okay, now the pots are not going to get any taller in this firing, they will shrink. But if you're so close to the actual wood, and this is really close, and we're talking 1/8 of an inch, I'm worried that the glaze, as it melts, might actually lift up a little bit and touch the actual shelf above. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch prop on top of there. Alright, so when I actually add these little 1/2 inch props, it will actually save me 1/2 inch by using that. But that means I've got 3 kiln props on top of each other. Make sure they're really stable before you put the shelf on it.
Okay, once again, I moved. This bowl can sit anywhere we want here, but I'm moving it to there, so it's about 1 centimeter away from anything else. And then I have these tiny things. It's really good to have small things that you can put in. There's the stopper going into the little kiln props, so I can actually fire it on there. I want to make sure that glaze that's here doesn't run down. You get a sponge. So I'm going to wipe the stopper a little bit to make sure no glaze, because this will shrink and this will drop a little bit into the actual kiln prop. So I'm guessing, but you can see there's enough orange there, so hopefully it won't drop any further than that. And let's lift this little guy out. It'll make it easier to put them. And for you to see. That one's got plenty of orange. Now let's see if it goes back in. And you can look down the side, yep, plenty of room, so that bowl can come out a little bit. Oh, see how that moved then? So you've got to make sure you don't make it unstable. Now we test it again. Actually, I have one more here. Let's get this one in. I think there's room. You can maneuver and move things around a little bit. You can squeeze things in. I had a friend who had a daughter, Jim Reiner in Michigan. Some of you might know him. We used to do shows together in Ohio. And his daughter Molly used to make these little animals and sell them at craft fairs. So she could get maybe 20 in there, and that probably paid for the entire kiln firing. Okay, so we know that this is high enough, so it's a good 1/2 inch higher than the actual bowl. And that's the tallest piece on the shelf, so we know we're in good shape. There we go. And then we're up to potentially the last level to put things on, and we've been doing this with things that are all very similar in height. I have used small props, basically a 3 inch and a 1 inch to get to 4 inches because I didn't have any 4s, and that still wasn't quite high enough for me to feel secure. The mugs here are almost as tall as the prop, and that one, because it leans over a touch, is a bit higher. So I never throw anything away pottery wise. These are from a very old kiln years ago. I save the props and I place it on top. These are 1/2 inch little tiny props. Put them on there. So we have a very low piece and then a bunch of bowls the same height and some mugs that are just a bit taller than the actual bowls, and then I've got a couple of flat pieces that fit in there. That this is an order and that's an order. But anyway, we basically different height pieces just to fill up this shelf, but trying to keep it as close as possible. It's possible I could get one more on that place there. Okay, I squeezed one more mug in right there. So we've used this up and we've got a lot in there now. So I'm going to put the kiln shelf on and then we'll end up with one layer left. Be careful when you put these in that you don't chip the corners of your fire brick, and make sure that your thermocouple isn't getting hit either, because they break really easy. This shelf is about 1/4 inch away from the thermocouple, so it should be fine. But it moves it, but I have to really push to make it move, so that's very stable. But make sure you don't ever hit the thermocouple because you can break them and you wouldn't even know it. All right, so we're on to our last level. Okay, I have the last shelf and I've been looking, my mugs are all I have that's shortest and they barely fit. That's just tall, that's the tallest one I think. And it's about an eighth of an inch, quarter inch shorter than the top. What about that one? Yeah, that's a bit shorter. So I have decided to wipe the bottoms of the mugs. So my pieces are kind of tall for this top shelf, but if I wipe the bottom of the mug and sign the bare clay, then I can get away with a layer of these, which will actually fill up the shelf without stilts, which is not a big deal because most of the potters I know fire their clay like this anyway. Okay, this is the top shelf. So I had one low flat dish I could place in here, and then everything else has had the bottom glaze wiped off and the signing done on the straight clay. Be very careful if you chip the glaze off at this point, you have to hand paint it back on. And it's tight, but nothing is closer than say 3/4 of an inch away from a kiln prop. That one's probably the closest of all. I can even tilt that a little bit away from the elements. So I like to not get closer than 3/4 to an inch away from the elements. And nothing is too tall. I actually have my stick to measure. That's the tallest one out of the whole kiln. And I can see from the actual stick to the rim that there isn't much, it's an eighth of an inch, but the pot will shrink in the firing. And you can also bend down on the top shelf and just look and see if there's anything. That piece right here is the tallest one in the entire kiln, and if I'm worried about it, I could take it out. I'm just not sure. It's a bit closer than I like, so I think I am going to take it out. We'll just say we got one little mug there space, and there's nothing else that's that short to fit in there. Oh, actually there is. So after replacing that taller mug with a shorter mug, you close the lid and leave it propped open with the support that's supplied with the kiln. Don't put things on your soft brick holding the lid up, you'll dent and damage the soft brick. There are 3 peepholes. Leave all of them open at this point. We're going to preheat the kiln. It's a glaze firing, and so what you want to do is choose vari fire or cone fire. Well, I have my own program that I set for kilns, which uses segments, but I'm going to show you the simple way to do it at this point, just so you don't have to get too confused. But anyway, so we would choose slow glaze. I always use slow glaze, I don't use the fast, and press enter. We say cone, and then choose your cone, which is cone 6, enter, and hold just 11 minutes, enter, and that's it. And then you go to menu, reset, menu again, preheat, enter. I'm just going to say 30 minutes, enter, and that goes back. So we're going to have basically a cone fire slow glaze with a 30-minute preheat to make sure everything's thoroughly dry, and leaving the lid open until the temperature of this kiln is around 200 degrees. And if you still have moisture coming out, and a good way to tell is get a mirror, put it in the little hand mirror, put it in the fridge so it gets really cold, and then lift it out and actually place the mirror right at the top spy hole. And if you see any moisture developing on the mirror from condensation, you know you've still got water vapor evaporating out of the actual pots. So you may want to just turn it off for a while and let it dry a bit more, and then you could just press start again. But if it's no moisture, then you just close the lid and you close the bottom 2 spy holes, leaving the top one open, and then you just let the firing proceed as normal. If you're an advanced or want to try advanced firing technique, I use vari fire on this controller Bartlett, and I enter my own programs. So I use program 5, which I've pre-programmed, and it has 7 segments. Enter. Round 1, I go at 199 to 1015. Enter. No hold. Round 2, 99 to 1145. Enter. Hold 2, 0. And 200 to 2000. No hold. Then 108 to 2225, 11-minute hold. Round 5 is natural cool, so you enter 9999 down to 2000, enter, and then hold 50, no hold. 6 is 145, so it's a slow cool, down to 1750 with a 1 hour hold. And I've tried 35 minutes, 45 minutes, but I'm just trying an hour recently. And then the last bit is 69 degrees down to 1700 and no hold. So that's what is a slow cool, and then enter the alarm 9999. You don't need that. So the reason I do that, it's a slow cool program to enhance crystal development in the glazes. So natural cool from peak temperature 2225, which is a little below cone 6, which is 2232. But I only do an 11-minute soak, so glazes don't have time to travel. So lower than peak means it won't be quite as runny. And then when you have a fast cool natural down to 2000, you're not encouraging any runs in that part either. But then down to 1750 is a slow cool, and then from 1750, where you hold a soak for an hour, you then cool slow at 69 down to 1700. So you're really encouraging lots of crystals, and the glazes that create crystals generally have rutile in them or titanium dioxide. You get a lot of crystal formation. Also, iron glazes will crystallize at that slow cool as well, which is why Randy's Red works there too. But we're getting kind of complicated if you're a beginner. So that's why I was going to tell you to just try cone fire at first. It's the easy one because the manufacturer of these things actually pre-programs that for a sort of guaranteed fairly good success rate. So this video is basically on bisque firing and firing the glaze kiln. So that's maybe not where you are, because you may be firing in a school where they do their own thing. So you have to talk to them, maybe show them this, and maybe they'll change to these profiles too. They work for me. But everybody comes up with different profiles, and a lot of people are successful out there, so there's not just one way of doing all these things. The last video in this series is really about marketing and display, showing how to successfully sort of present your work to the public. So if you already know how to do all those things, or you have a better eye than I do, then maybe you won't need to watch that one. But it's everybody has a different approach there too, so this will just be my opinion. So you'll have to find your own path eventually anyway. But good luck on your firings. If you don't have a kiln and you're thinking about buying a kiln, you can always email me and I'll tell you what I think. If you find second-hand kilns, you can always send me a photograph of a second-hand kiln. I'll give you an impression. I can't test the wiring, obviously, being you're farther away. But you might find a really good bargain out there. The manual kilns, if you find one of those, I'll try and put a link in this video to how to fire those kilns. The manual kilns are also different. If they have a Dawson kiln sitter and a little timer, then that's good. If they just have a Dawson, that's okay, but it's not so good. But Dawsons can fail and you may overfire. If you are going to buy a cheap Dawson kiln sitter kiln without a digital pyrometer, you need to buy one of these, which has 2 thermocouples on this one for actually putting into the spy holes of the kiln, and then you can actually check the temperatures of your kiln all the way up. I wouldn't try firing a kiln manually if you're a beginner with just a Dawson kiln sitter. It can be done. I know people that have done it. I also know people that have had, you know, accidents doing it. So I would buy one of these from your local supplier. It's just a thermocouple pyrometer, digital, about $150. So it's worth an investment. So good luck. Okay, this was the kiln that was just earlier in this video packed. This is what they look like after the firing. This is the matte black with the blue inside, a bit of variegated blue on the top just to give it a little difference. These are all the mugs. I'm not going to really show you a lot in here because it's not a kiln unloading video. This is a kiln firing video. So you can see it worked. And this was the program I'm putting in the video right now to actually get the slow cool crystal effect. Let's see if there's some really good ones. Look at those crystals. Let's get over this so you can see it. In the runs down from the top, you got all those crystals developing. That's because of a slow cool profile. Anything else here? Yeah, the purple doesn't really have it too much, but the green, really good. Anyway, so we had a good firing.